this video, I'm going to share how my childhood trauma significantly impacted my pregnancy and labor experience. But before I share that, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Janellis. I created this YouTube channel to share my personal journey towards trauma healing in a completely transparent way. It is my goal with this channel to enable myself and others to live a life filled with joy, trust, and fulfillment. If you would like to join me on this journey, please subscribe to my channel. So first, I'll talk about pregnancy and trauma. I didn't know this until I was pregnant, but pregnancy can be a trigger for past trauma. People who have a history of trauma tend to experience higher levels of anxiety during their pregnancy, which was my experience. I also experienced a lot of flashbacks and just a lot of being forced to deal with my past trauma. Like I could no longer suppress it anymore. It was something that I had to face head on. So during this time was when I really sought out therapy. I had given up on it before because I had negative experiences in the past, but it just came to the point where I knew I couldn't handle it on my own anymore. I had already been on medication. I would say about a month or so before I found that I was pregnant. I had started a new medication. Maybe it was 2 months, and I noticed an improvement. So I knew that I wanted to continue taking it during my pregnancy, especially since my anxiety was only getting worse because of the pregnancy. However, my psychiatrist did keep in mind that I was pregnant when recommending different doses and all that. So after I read about the different ways that pregnancy and trauma can relate to each other, like what I explained about the anxiety, I looked up how childhood trauma or just trauma in general could affect delivery. And something that I kept reading was that people can have a traumatic experience during delivery if they have childhood trauma or again trauma in general in their past. And because of this, I made it a point to talk to the midwives that I had appointments with to make them aware of my trauma in the past, because I didn't know if that would affect how the delivery went. So after I read about the different ways that trauma could impact pregnancy, I then looked up the impacts that it could have on delivery. And I saw that delivery could be a traumatic experience for people with my past. So I made it a point to talk to the different midwives that I had appointments with to let them know about my past, because I figured it might affect the different options or opinions that they would give me regarding my delivery. So with that said, I had two main goals for my delivery. One was for it to be completely unmedicated, and another was for the whole thing to be recorded. Luckily, I was able to record the delivery, and I have an unblurred full frontal view of that uploaded already, and I'll link the video to that in the description box below. But as far as the other goal, that one was a little bit more complicated. So one of the midwives made it a point to really let me know, like, I know you want an unmedicated birth and that's really important to you, but I just want you to know that people with your past, the pressure of delivery can be very traumatic for them, and it can be like a trigger for a lot of flashbacks, and was just really giving me a heads up. But I kept thinking like, oh, I'm in therapy now, I've tried grounding, my anxiety's getting a little bit better, like I think I got this. Like I don't think I fully understood. Actually, I know I didn't fully understood what she was saying, because I was just so confident, and sometimes I can be really stubborn, and once I have something decided in my mind, I think, no, it's gonna be this way. Like, what are you talking about? It's gonna be fine, it's gonna be fine. Until the delivery came. So my water broke around 2:30 in the morning, and then when I got checked in, a part of the check-in process is to have your cervix checked, and I didn't understand what this meant. It's where fingers are inserted like deep in your vagina to check the cervix, which is really, really far back, and I didn't realize like how deep it would have to go. So I started just like freaking out, and my anxiety was just crazy because it wasn't one of the midwives that I had talked to. It was like one of the check-in people. I don't even know, like I'm guessing the nurse. And that was just a very uncomfortable experience for me. Like she ended up not being able to fully check my cervix. She just stopped and said, okay, we'll just wait for the midwife to check you later on. And then around 11:30 is when I saw my midwife. I had nurses checking on me before then, but they didn't check my cervix. And then they decided at around that time that since my body still hadn't gone into active labor, to induce me. But at this point, like, because of that first cervix check giving me anxiety, I was already in an anxious mindset. Then after I was induced, the contractions started coming in, and they started coming in stronger and closer together. And it reminded me of period pains that I had when I was younger. Like, I used to have very strong period pains to the point that I would have to be in like fetal position because it just hurt so bad. So I told myself, oh, I got this. Like, I handled this in the past before. I have this under control, until it just sped up. Like, it just really hurt so much. Like, the pain just jumped from whatever level it was to triple the amount. The hot tub definitely helped with the pain a lot to a certain point. Once it got to a certain point of pain, I experienced what the midwife was trying to warn me about earlier on, and it was like different flashbacks. So while I was experiencing the pain, the midwife kept telling me to try to stay on top of the contractions, to not fight the pain. However, I was having a difficult time following that instruction because during my resting period, like whenever the contractions weren't happening, which is like when you're supposed to kind of relax and take it easy, I was experiencing flashbacks. And I don't think anyone in the room realized it, and I didn't fully realize it, that was going on, just because there was just so much happening. But I would go deep into a flashback, almost like reliving different moments of my past. And then as soon as a contraction would hit, it felt like I was just punched in the face while sleeping. So like, if you're sucker punched, you can't brace yourself for the hit. So the same thing with the contraction. Since I was being hit with a contraction while I was in a flashback, I couldn't stay on top of the contraction. It was just like, oh shoot, it's happening. And then I was just trying to get by. And because of that, I was fighting the contraction. And it was making it harder for my body to just let the cervix open. So this went on for a couple hours, I would say, maybe like 3 or 4 or something like that. And in the middle of this, my cervix still had to be checked to make sure that I was ready for delivery, which that also freaked me out still, because I'm not sure why, but it did, and it increased my anxiety as well, until I got to a certain point where I was just like, I am ready for this to be over. And then the cervix checks became a little bit easier, just because I was just like, this needs to be done, this is too much. But so after like 3 or 4 hours of that happening, the midwife thought that I was ready to deliver. So I moved back over to the bed, and I have about 20 minutes of this footage. I'm not sure if I'm going to post it yet, but I tried my best to deliver, and I was pushing for like 15-20 minutes, but nothing was happening. And then it turns out that I still had like half a centimeter or a centimeter left to open up, so I wasn't ready to deliver. So they moved me back to the hot tub, which at this point I was in so much pain. I was mentally exhausted, or at least getting there. And I kept thinking, I don't know if I can do this. And I was voicing that to them, but they thought, like, this is normal. Like, you can do this. Like, you can be strong. You can stick by your goals. And I think I didn't want to let anyone down. But then this time when I was in the bathtub or hot tub, I experienced what I did before with the flashbacks and like the sucker punch of a contraction. But this time it was a little bit different. It was like a coming to Jesus, like self-realization moment of where I could hear my voice talking to me, telling me different things that I had to work on within myself. Like, they were pointing out survival tactics that I have learned in order to keep myself safe and to keep myself going to, experience the trauma that I had, but like to still preserve myself, I suppose. And it was just like telling myself that you don't need to do that anymore. Like, you don't have to live your life in such a guarded way anymore. Like, you can just let go of these things. You're safe now. And it was telling me very specific things that I had to work on. And it was just so weird because it was this on top of the flashbacks, on top of the contractions, and just the pain of the contractions. It was just so much. I was getting physically tired. I was also getting emotionally exhausted. And I should also point out that most hospitals, they don't allow you to eat during labor because of complications that it might cause. Luckily, at the hospital that I was delivering at, they allowed clear liquids. So they allowed like fruit juices, popsicles, broth, and I think that's it. Oh, and Italian ice. So I was able to eat those things, but I hadn't had a full meal since the day prior, like the night prior, like at 6. So I had dinner at a normal time, I suppose. So I also didn't have the calories to like keep me going. So again, I was just tired in many ways. And it got to the point where I couldn't anymore. And then I noticed the midwife pulled Drew aside, and then I immediately assumed she's probably gonna mention an epidural. Like, even though I said many times that I don't want one, she's probably gonna say that's probably a good idea at this point. And that is actually what the conversation was. And I heard Drew saying no, like she said absolutely not. And I remember just screaming, I need an epidural. Like, screw that, I need an epidural. Because one of the things that my voice saying to myself was like telling me like I need an epidural, like you have nothing to prove to people, this is something that you need for yourself because you're mentally exhausted. Like, it was just pointing out the facts of how I felt at that moment. Like, I was just, like I said, too tired to even have a thought. So to push a baby out, like, it was just not in the works for me that way. And they talked to me many times, like, are you sure? Because you're almost there. Like, I'm not sure why it's taking your body this long to open up that last bit. But I was just like, no, I need an epidural. And I kept screaming that over and over and over. And we moved me to the bed, and we were waiting for the epidural to come. And when the guy came to give me the epidural, he was telling me all these risks that come with the epidural, and asked if I signed the paperwork, which I almost didn't. I'm so glad that I did. Something inside me said just sign it anyways, because that would have delayed the epidural, which, oh my gosh, I could not do with any delays at that point. But he kept saying, like, I need a response from you. But at this point, it was hard for me to talk. Like, I was just thinking my answers in my head because I just didn't have the energy to even talk. Because at this point, it was like 19 hours into labor. I should say that. But he just kept saying, I need a response from you. And I just wouldn't give it to him, or I might have nodded my head or something like that. And the only thing that I remember him saying, because honestly, I was just blocking him out because I was just trying to get through the pain, was he said, if you move too much, or if I feel like giving you this epidural is not safe, I will not give you the epidural. And then all of a sudden, I was just like, okay, I need an epidural because I just need one. So I need to figure this out and just manage to control these contractions, because he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't be putting in the needle during a contraction, which the contractions, it was difficult to not move during them, I'll say that. But luckily, getting the epidural went fine. I somehow managed to just like really control myself, because I told myself, like, okay, it's 3 or 4 contractions. They let me know I'll probably experience 3 to 4 contractions before the epidural starts working, or before the whole process is done. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, 3 to 4 more of these, like, that's a lot. But 3 or 4 more of these is better than an indefinite amount, because I don't get the epidural. And I knew for sure I did not want a C-section. So I was trying my best to definitely avoid that at the very least. So, again, the epidural went fine, and I still felt a little bit of the pain, like the sharpness after that. So they gave me a little bit more. It was a more epidural. I forget what it is, just to take away that sharpness. And they said that I could use a little bit more if I wanted to, but I didn't, because it took away the sharpness, but I didn't want it to take away the pressure completely, because I still wanted to feel what was happening so I could still be somewhat in control of the situation. So I messed up earlier. It was actually 17 hours into labor, because then another hour passed and they did a cervix check and they saw that I was ready to deliver. So it was 18 hours at that point. And then I pushed for about 2 hours. And again, I have an unblurred full frontal view of that delivery linked in the description box below. But yeah, my labor was definitely an experience. But even though there were times where I was wondering, should I have just gotten an epidural from the beginning, I'm glad that I didn't, because that coming to Jesus, whatever moment that I had, was very life changing for me. To confront a lot of harsh truths about myself from myself was very enlightening, to say the least. And since giving birth, I noticed a change in me as well. Like, I'm a lot more patient now. I hear a lot of parents say that, and I just find myself getting less bothered by things that would easily bother me before. With that said, please let me know any questions you have about my labor or delivery process in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you would like to further support my content, please go to patreon.com/yourfriendjanellis to become a member of my Patreon. As you may know, Patreon is a way for fans to support the content that they love on a monthly basis. Members of my Patreon enjoy the exclusive benefits of a chat community, live streams, and guaranteed access to me via direct messaging. By supporting my Patreon, you're allowing me to dedicate the time and effort necessary to create, edit, and upload new videos on a weekly basis. Thank you so much for your support, and I appreciate you all.